Hey everybody, you got David Abrams here for today's Demio Discover call, and I just want to thank you guys for being patient here. We're just starting a couple minutes past 11:30 here today, and really appreciate all of you guys for coming out. I have an extremely special guest, Eric. I'm just so pumped to have you here, man. I've actually been a big follower of yours for a while. I still have a lot of your emails around hiring and stuff like that from a couple of years ago when you were, I think, doing a lot around your A-player hiring program, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
But been following you for quite a while. I know Single Grain. I had an agency a couple of years ago and followed Single Grain. I worked with Kent Clothier and some other guys, and that we always try to look at what you guys are doing because you guys had such an amazing agency. So just pumped to have you here, brother, and thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Well, listen, because we only have about 30, 40 minutes today, guys, we're just going to jump right in. Again, we have the public chat here, so if you have any questions along the way, feel free to pop them in. Otherwise, we'll just kind of jump into your story. And honestly, what I would love to know is, I know where you are today. I know where you're at, the companies you've worked with, the podcast that you're doing. How'd you get here? How'd you even get started in this whole realm?
Yeah, I started going back to I'm actually looking outside in downtown LA right now. When I graduated from college, I was working at the Wells Fargo building over there doing a data entry job, which is like a dead end job. And then my friend told me, hey, you should look into this digital marketing thing. And then, one thing led to another. I think I changed probably 6 jobs in the next year just because, whenever I hit a growth plateau, I just wanted to move on to the next thing. And usually when you see something like that, it's probably has, the makings of an entrepreneur when you're changing jobs all the time. And then that led to me eventually, going to lead growth at a startup called Treehouse. They're, the online education startup, and they're $100 million company now. And afterwards, Neil Patel, one of my friends, told me to help this company called Single Grain. Which, originally I did come from the agency world too. I wasn't really interested in it, but the concept of being able to, at Treehouse, the company was stagnant for 2 years, and then we were able to turn things around. In this case, this company was going, it was in trouble. So we had to, this was saving a company. So I thought, having the opportunity to save a company is not something you get every day. So I took a shot at it. And when I took over, company was negative, and then, that was about almost 4 years ago.
Wow. Well, let me ask you, when you were at Treehouse, what were you doing there?
Yep. So I was leading growth. I had a team under me, supporting my efforts. Overall, I was just trying to figure out what user acquisition channels were the ones to go after.
So, not coming from a marketing background, obviously data entry and stuff like that, how'd you start learning these different acquisition strategies? What were you doing like initially when you didn't know what to do? What were you just kind of shooting from the hip, seeing what worked and what stuck? And like, what were you doing during that time?
Yeah, so this was when I was 23 years old. I think, most of the stuff in marketing, you really don't, you're not going to learn it from college, especially digital marketing. You're not going to pick it up in college. So you're better off being self-taught or going to these other schools that are all starting today, like Tradecraft, for example, or Growth X Academy or whatever. So you're better off doing that than going to college, because once you go to college, first of all, it's going to be outdated once you graduate. It's strictly just, I took an internship. It was unpaid, and learned a lot from that because they provided a lot of resources for us.
That's awesome. I actually did the same thing. I did an unpaid internship to get into it and went to college for something totally unrelated, like creative writing and anthropology. So it's like crazy. Anyway, so you had these, you kind of took this internship, you learned these things. But again, I think, and the reason I'm asking this question is I think a lot of people, when they're trying to find the right acquisition strategy, a lot of times they don't know which ones are the right ones. So when you came into Single Grain, probably you had the ability to learn from your past experience. But when you first got started in acquisition strategies in Treehouse, like what did you actually know was going to be the right one? Or were you just, again, like, did you have metrics to go against? Was there someone kind of telling you which direction to go?
Yeah, so this one was fairly simple. We basically I shut down all the advertising campaigns when I came in, and then we looked at whatever had some kind of sign of traction, which is the numbers were improving, getting better over time. And what we saw was, because our videos, we were teaching people how to do coding, web design, things like that. It just made sense for people to be watching on YouTube. So I checked our YouTube ads account, and lo and behold, we actually had traction there, but we gave up too early. So a lot of times, even with life and business, marketing, whatever it is, people tend to give up too early. And for me, I just bet the entire company on that because 1 month into it, the CEO already told me that we needed to hit numbers next month, or he would have to let me go, even though like nothing was my fault. So I was totally okay with that, and that's kind of a come to Jesus moment. Are you going to do something about it, or are you going to step up, or cry in a corner?
Yeah, no, I mean that's sometimes it takes those moments like that to really understand like what you can do and like you have the potential for when you're like kind of backed against the wall. But that's amazing. I think one thing that I really take from that is understand like maybe your best method of communication. I think every business has a different method of communication as far as how people can accept information. So for you guys being training management, it makes sense that video would be such a great resource there. So when do you know that you've given up too early? I think this is a question that I've always had and people have, like, when do you know something's not going to work versus like, let's keep pushing into it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of and this is given that we're talking about marketing, but there's a lot of gut feeling behind it. Like if you don't feel the inspiration behind it anymore, you can just throw in the towel. And then if the market's telling you, hey, like this isn't going to work, then give up. But the thing with me is I don't really do a good job of giving up. Like if I look at the first podcast I have, Growth Everywhere, as I was saving single grain, I started this new podcast. And I was spending 6 hours a week. So I was interviewing, I was setting up the show notes, I was editing, I was putting everything together. I'd do the promotion as well. It'd take me 6 hours a week, in addition to what I was doing. And after a year of doing this, I had great guests on the show, right? These are well-known kind of business people, and like Rand Fishkin or Noah Kagan and all these people. But after a year, I was getting 9 downloads a day, and that's when it's like, okay, well, the numbers are telling you should clearly give up. It's not working for you. But for me, I just felt like I was doing something right, and then I would could constantly get emails from people saying, "Hey, well, I really like what you're doing right here. I don't know why you're not getting more downloads." But that kind of unsolicited feedback is what kept me going, and from there, it's just like things kind of took off.
Where's the podcast at now?
Yep. So podcast, that one's getting about 130,000 downloads a month, and then the new one I have with Neil, that's about 600,000 a month.
That's fantastic. And what did you find like from that transition period from the 9 downloads to the growth? What strategies did you find that actually helped propel that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just consistency. It's boring, right? I was actually talking with, I actually did an interview yesterday with Noah Kagan, and we talked about how things have changed over the years. And, we're realizing as we get older, it's just consistency. It's the boring stuff. It's the stuff that people don't want to do. And, the quote that I used is, successful people are willing to do the things that unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. And that's what it is. It's, people are always looking for, what's a hack? What's sexy? What can I do to grow immediately? It's just, you just stick with it. That's it.
That's fantastic. And I was actually watching a Gary Vee video the other day, and he said, the one thing that really propels people to the top is just doing the work, like the day in, day out. Like you think about a farmer, like the guy who's milking the cows every single day. There's nothing sexy about that. There's nothing fun about that. But sometimes you just got to do that every single day. So like I've been telling my co-founder Wyatt, like on the tough days when you're just doing the grind, you're just milking the cows. You got to do what you have to do, and the consistency is so critical to that.
Yeah.
Besides consistency, did you have any like unique marketing strategies or advertising things that you were doing outside of that to promote the show? And I'm kind of asking from a inquisitive point of view. I want to know right now, like, for myself, what kind of things you guys were doing that really kind of clicked.
Going back to the consistency thing, I mean, as long as you stick with it, you're going to naturally find the channels that work. And if you can't find the channels that work for you, the channels that are going to help you grow, then like that's on you at the end of the day. If you can't figure it, this is actually interesting. I was moderating a panel last week at a conference, and Larry Kim was on there from WordStream, right? And I was trying to actually dig what you're trying to dig out of me right now from him, and he's like, dude, if like you can't figure it out, you can't hire developers, you can't find a co-founder, like you suck. That's on you. But to kind of answer your question a little bit, I'll tell you what worked for us that no longer works today is we're using Product Hunt, and Product Hunt had a podcast section, and we're basically those podcasts were appearing on it every single day, and we're always in the top 5 every single day, and that did help grow us.
That's awesome. I still think the consistency thing is the key thing, and I totally agree with you. And I think especially with content, you have to be very heavy with putting out content, a lot of content, being okay with that strategy. So I'm going to jump back to your journey real fast. So you're at Single Grain. You guys had to turn it around. What did that part look like? Was that kind of like, I mean, you took on the challenge, but is that a scary moment when you're saying and accepting yes to that?
Yeah, that was definitely really it was challenging, but when I think back on it, like I think about Treehouse, I think about Single Grain. It wasn't that hard. It's a nice journey, but I mean, I will tell you that when you have employees, when you have to come in and you have to lay off employees, and then employees are quitting on you at the same time, basically they're firing you, and when you have to change a business which is an SEO company into we're basically focused on paid advertising now. And we still do that. We like brought back our SEO services, but like to have to do that pivot while you have to adjust all these employees out and while the company is negative, there's a lot weighing on you. And at that point you have to really focus in on the things that are important, just consistently do the same things over and over. I got to the point where I remember our outside accountant, we had a come to Jesus moment, another come to Jesus moment where they're like, hey, Eric, we should talk. The CEO was on the line, the CFO was on the line, and our staff accountant on their team was on the line too. And the CEO was like, hey, have you thought about shutting this thing down? And it did get to that point, but we pulled through it, and it's just because we just nose to the grindstone. You keep going, and I will tell you that with Single Grain initially, all of our leads, we were reliant on one lead source. It was from one person, and it was from Neil, right? And it was, he has a really big brand and everything. And, I didn't want to rely on that. So I actually shut that down. And our site was only getting like 4,000 visits a month. Now it's higher than that. Now we're at about, probably 65K or so, which is decent for a marketing site. But then, now we have, 2 podcasts as well. It's just, you learn how to diversify, and you can't put all your eggs in one basket. And you start to do good work. You hire great people, and they buy into your vision. And the final thing I'll add to this is I joined a group called Entrepreneurs Organization about 4 years ago. And one guy that joined with me at the same time, his business was doing about $3 million a year. And I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him. I said, how are things going? And he said, hey, we're doing 22 million a year now. And I was like, okay, well, what happened? What's the secret? And he's like, you just hire great people and you get the fuck out of their way, right? And it's another one of those cliche things, but you hear it so often, but so many people fail at it, right? So many people are trying to go cheap all the time. They're trying to, save a little here, save a little there, and then nickel and dime people that you hire, and it just doesn't work out in the long term.
No, I don't. I think you got to think of a business as an idea, and it's an idea created by great people. And if you don't have great people in there to help turn that vision into reality, you will fail. So I absolutely love that advice. Let me ask you a question, and I actually have 2 questions. But first and foremost is when you're dealing with that kind of staring into the abyss, as Elon calls it, staring into the abyss, eating glass, the moment of the business where you're like, you could possibly be shut down, you're out of money, you're in the negative, you're firing employees. What emotions are you going through? How do you deal with the mental toughness, or how do you get through that kind of mental? Because doing the things is fine, you can do those things, but there are probably days, and I know because we had a similar journey where it's like there were days where it's like we didn't know if this thing was still going to go. But how do you fight that? How do you get through that?
I'm okay with, the thing about me is I used to play a lot of poker in college. So poker is the greatest. It's a great lesson because it doesn't matter how well you play. Sometimes you can bring your A game for, months at a time, right? And you can still lose for months at a time. I'll have hot streaks where I cannot lose for a month or so. And then I'll have streaks where I'm playing really well, but I'll lose for, a couple months at a time, right? So from there, you learn how to you learn how to control your emotions a lot more. You can look into things such as stoicism. Tim Ferriss talks about it a lot. Ryan Holiday talks about it a lot. You only worry about the things that you can control, and you don't get frustrated by these things. You just kind of keep going. And I've learned to control my emotions a lot more, to let go a lot more, because at the end of the day, I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? You lose the business, what's the worst thing that can happen? Fact of the matter is, if you lose your business, you're a smart guy. Worst case scenario, you find a really good paying job. That's the worst case scenario. Wow, tough life, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think perspective does a lot. And I absolutely love hearing that. And by the way, if anyone doesn't know about Ryan Holiday, fantastic author, fantastic newsletter, The Daily Stoic, I believe it's called. definitely check him out. He's absolutely fantastic. I would love to have him on the show. But I think the other question I had, and I think this is really interesting, is that you turned off the traffic source, the Neil traffic source. And I totally get that, because when I had my agency, we had like our referral sources, which were probably about 80% of our traffic generation and lead generation for sales. So did you do that just to kind of test the metal and to say, hey, listen, we're going to turn it off. We're going to do this on our own. What was the significance there?
It was really to see, like, could we
Sorry, I think you're muted.
Am I muted? It says it's still going.
Good.
I'm good. Okay, good. So yeah, I mean, it was really to test, like, hey, like, I felt like that this agency was built on Neil's backbone, and I just didn't want to like be positioned that way. I didn't want to rely on him. I mean, the ex partners, we're all good friends of Neil's, right? But I just didn't feel like that was a way to build a long term business. Plus, it sucked some of our cash flow away too. So I wanted to be self sustaining. And that's how you build a real business for the long term.
Fantastic. And which direction did you guys go in? So you're at 4,000 hits a month. What growth strategies did you start to integrate in there to build it back up?
Yeah, we did a lot of. We just started creating a lot more content. So it's the inbound strategy, inbound and SEO. So a lot of content marketing, and then whatever we saw that was ranking well, we build links to it, and then we start to rank well for certain keywords. And then nowadays, because we're seen as an authority in front of Google's eyes, sometimes we'll just write stuff and it'll start to rank really well for stuff like how to get Snapchat friends, or marketing funnels, or best internet marketing company, or things like that. We didn't even build links for those, and they're just ranking that way.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's just getting the authority up there. That's great. So you guys have, as you built that authority, you guys got bigger and bigger clients. I know you did Salesforce and Intuit. Were those from referrals from Neil, or were those actually companies that you guys captured yourself? And what would your takeaways be from those companies? I mean, you were probably doing huge advertising strategies and consulting with them. What kind of things you take away from that?
Yeah, so Salesforce and Intuit, those were before my time, and I know those came as referrals from Neil. And then
Nice.
For right now, I mean, some of the clients we work with would be like Uber and Amazon. Those are actually from, that could be a result of SEO, and a lot of are coming through referral too. And the lesson I have, I mean, being able to do podcasts, like even what we're doing right now in audio form, like if people are listening to you while they're working out, whatever it is exactly, like they're building an intimate relationship with you. I remember speaking at a conference a couple of weeks ago in London, and we're doing Q&A, and a girl was like, hey, like, I actually listen to your stuff in the shower. And then, the whole audience like starts laughing, but it's like, it actually gets to that level. It's intimate, right? So I think podcasting is great. Podcasting has been great for us because sales cycles are a lot shorter, lifetime value is higher, and things like that.
Got it. And when you're working with these clients, are you guys, you're still mostly focusing on just paid traffic, or you guys also, you said you're venturing into SEO now and stuff like that? What kind of strategies do you guys typically talk about?
We're mainly doing paid ads, and a lot of our clients are doing Facebook advertising. And then they often come to us for new ideas too, right? Like, so free Facebook Messenger ads, for example, there's Quora advertising, Pinterest ads, Apple search ads, all these new things they expect to come to them with new ideas. And then we do SEO too. So the mainly on the SEO side, all we do is, A, technical audits, and B, link building.
Okay, nice. And I mean, I know what it's like being in an agency, and I can say, like, when I was in the agency, we were so focused on client work, like bringing in leads, bringing in sales, creating the great, marketing funnels and campaigns and stuff like that. How are you guys also staying on the cutting edge to learn the different new strategies that are coming in? And which ones are you vetting that are going to be like, are you spending time actually taking new strategies and implementing them in your own marketing strategies and then transferring them to your clients? Or are you just like learning from someone else and then transferring them to your clients? How are you kind of testing those methods before you're bringing them out and rolling them out to clients?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, the podcast I have with Neil is a daily marketing podcast, and it holds us both accountable because I have to come with the heat. He has to come with the heat too. So we both have to stay up to date when it comes to marketing. And what I do is, because I'm at these conferences, I'm hearing from other people, like there's a lot of noise, right? People are talking about things. But if I start to see signal, like Facebook Messenger bought this, Facebook Messenger that, like, then I'll start to look at it a lot more. And I'll start to test it on, my own stuff, right? And that way, it holds us accountable to staying innovative because, we can't just, when you work with agencies, the value that you're looking for is execution, but then you also want ideas at the same time. Too, and that's how you get continual value. It's not just the same execution over and over where it goes into the autopilot.
100%. And is that kind of how you guys keep your LTV higher with recurring work with clients by bringing them back into new strategies and stuff like that? Or do you guys have retainer packages, stuff like that?
Yeah, so it is retainer packages, and then I'll meet with them like when I'm speaking. Let's say I'm in SF, then I'm gonna make an effort to go out there and meet with them in person, because that always pays off, and that applies to any business, right? Like the agency we have is one thing, but the concept, the workflow of how we do things can apply to any of the other stuff that we're working on.
Awesome. And now, what is a day-to-day? It sounds like you do a lot of like speaking and obviously the podcast and stuff. What does a day-to-day kind of view of your life look like as CEO here with the agency with so much stuff going on?
Yeah. So, what I was looking at, I audited my last year, in December. It's like, what I need to focus on, what am I good at, what actually adds, great returns, and, speaking or creating content in general. That can be podcast, speaking, whatever it is. That helps in the long term because only I can do that. Maybe not so much on the blog post side, but the podcasting side of things, that's important, right? Because and this goes off into tangent a little bit, but I was talking to one of the guys at HubSpot, and I was like, hey, what happened to your growth podcast? He's like, well, there's turnover and things like that. Well, what's unique about podcasting for me and also Neil is that, we can commit to it forever because, there's not going to be turnover from us. We're just going to keep doing it. So, content creation is number one. In terms of prioritization, I actually just made a list of how I want to adjust my weekly cadence. So I think time blocking is really important. And there's a post from Michael Hyatt about how to set up like a weekly cadence. I recommend checking it out because he shows a calendar on how he sets it up. But basically, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but Mondays is really for one-on-ones, meetings, phone calls, and then I'm for me as a leader, it's really about content creation, recruiting, and building relationships with people. Those are kind of the three main things.
That's fantastic. That's actually really, really helpful. And when you were kind of getting started with Single Grain, did you have to change a lot of the operational systems or kind of change how the day-to-day was run? I'm sure there was probably some broken systems and habits in there from people. Is that something you saw pretty heavily that may have weighed on why that company was not doing as well as it should have been doing?
Everything was broken. So there were no processes, there was no systems. Even the finance process was broken too. The way we collected cash and everything like that. So there was just if you don't have any processes, at the end of the day, it's a house of cards, and that's what I thought it was looking from the outside coming in. But I didn't. It was actually worse than I thought. So think of it this way: I have to come in, put in systems and processes. We have to do a redesign. I started a podcast that I shouldn't have started. Midway through, I decided to shut down the leads from Neil too. We're working on a new SEO strategy too. I have to fire people, and then people are quitting at the same time. So the whole thing's on fire, right? And outside accounting firms like, you should shut it down, blah blah blah. So it's just like you learn to weather the storm.
Yeah, and I think the poker analogy is really smart because it's just you were in a tough period. And I think for a lot of people that didn't have the mental toughness probably would have given up at that point. And I think especially going and knowing the challenge and then only to be surprised by it being even more of a challenge than you ever expected. But really, congrats to you for pushing on through. And I think I can't remember the quote, but someone says like the key thing that makes an entrepreneur successful is just their ability to persevere. And
right.
It sounds like that's really what it was. It's like you were just saying, like, and at some level, I feel like as entrepreneurs, we're very stubborn. Like we're stubborn people. Like no one can tell us to quit or like shut it off. We're just like, no, we're not going to listen to you.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting? I spoke with Sujin, who's he's the original founder of the company a couple weeks ago because we spoke at the same conference, and we kind of reflected on it, and we said, coming back to it, would we have done the same thing a couple years back? Because we had that crossroads, right? Of would I take over the company or would he shut it down? And basically my response was it's harder to go from negative 100 to 100, right? Because it's 200. If you go from 0 to 100, it's actually easier, right? There's for us, no systems, no processes set up. So if I were to go back in time, I probably would have just not done it and done my own thing. It probably wouldn't have been an agency. And then Sujin, he said he probably would have shut it down. So hindsight's 2020. It ended up working out well for both of us. But if we were to go back in time, we probably wouldn't have done the same thing.
It's funny because I was going to ask that question, and I ask that question a lot to people on the show and off and stuff. And a lot of people typically say I would not go back and do it again. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that we can still persevere, we can still succeed and stuff. And it's like, well, hindsight is 2020, but we're here now. And I think one of the interesting things that I kind of learned along the way on our journey is that sometimes we get roped into things or we make decisions, and we have to also learn when to fold them. And I think maybe sometimes our stubbornness can also get us into trouble in the fact that, like, if you had continued to go down that path, you could easily have, in hindsight, been like, well, I should have shut it down 6 months before and I had failed. But, sometimes we have to learn also, like, there's that balance there. Have you had a moment where you felt that you missed the balance of making the right decision, or it's just like, you take it as a failure and it's just whatever, it's part of the journry?
I think it's part of the journey. And, you talked about Gary Vee kind of, going along with the journey. It's each step you're kind of leveling up. And I think, there's, reality eventually catches up, right? I think there's a story about how Elon Musk tried to get a job at Netscape, right? In the early days, like, he was scared. He didn't think he could do it, blah, blah, blah. But, like, you just keep working really hard. And then, a few years later, like, the overnight success happens. I think you just keep working, there's the agency right now, but then what's the next step, right? It's, okay, you have conferences, things like that. Okay, maybe there's a product afterwards. Okay, maybe there's a book thing coming afterwards. You just keep building and building. But I think, we're as entrepreneurs or even as human beings, we're really impatient. And I think, we often compare our chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 25. And I just don't think that's very realistic.
100%. It's not fair to ourselves. And we all do it. And I think social media doesn't help, I think, on a lot of levels. Like, you go on social media and it's like everyone's like highlights of their life, but it's so easy to do that. And, I have that exact same analogy that you just said, the leveling up. And I wish I talked about that, but I think everything that we do is a step to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And it's got to be a long-term play. But we can kind of wrap up on your journey there. I just want to stop real fast, and we kind of have a few people here, and see if anyone had any questions for Eric, any thoughts or ideas on the journey, anything that they want to ask before we kind of wrap up today. We're going to do a little bit of a shorter show. And in the meantime, real fast, I just want to announce that you did choose Charity Water today. So we'll be donating $50 today to Charity Water just for this call. So we'll make that in your honor as well. And if anyone has any questions, I'm not sure if anyone does, but otherwise we can kind of wrap up. And I'm going to ask you this before we do. Looking back on everything that you went through, this entire journey, what would you say if you were going to tell yourself, if you were going to do the journey again, what would you tell yourself, like, to know or maybe to think about before you even get into it?
You'll figure it out. Growing up, I always thought, how am I gonna figure it out, blah, blah, blah. But then you realize that, everyone's figuring it out, right? Everyone's kind of putting it together as they go. So, enjoy the journey, and just, keep going, and, you'll figure it out.
That's awesome. I love that advice. I'm going to take it and use it myself. But Eric, man, I really, really appreciate your time, brother. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody, thanks for joining us on the show, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye-bye.